welcome to the March 19th program of the League of Women Voters Grand Traverse Area, with the Traverse Area District Library hosting us in this vital and enriching location, also with Traverse Area Community Media offering technology and media support. March is National Reading Month. Today is Chocolate Caramel Day. Spring is out there somewhere, and it's a pleasant, happy combination. Our topic today is From Publication to the Public, a Library Book's Path to the Reader. Presenting today are Michele Howard, Director of Traverse Area District Library, Stephie Luyt, Elementary Library Coordinator for Traverse City Area Public Schools, and Karrie Zeits, a governmental law attorney. Jackie Richer, an ASL interpreter, will be signing. I am League member Eunice Crockett, your moderator for today's program. The League of Women Voters is a national nonpartisan organization whose main mission is to empower and inform voters and to defend democracy. The League neither endorses nor opposes candidates or parties, but encourages the informed and active participation of all citizens in government. It works to increase public understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership in the League is open to men and women, and we offer a special discount for students. The program today is viewed in several ways. In person, so please, studio audience etiquette, check your phones. Traverse Area Community Media web stream, live stream at www.tacm.tv/communitytvnow. League of Women Voters of the Grand Traverse Area Facebook page, Community TV channel 189 with Spectrum Cable TV in Northwest Lower Michigan. Today we welcome our guests. Ms. Howard has served as Traverse Area District Library's Director since 2019 and has worked in libraries for almost 30 years. Her experience in local government and involvement in local organization helps her lead a community-centered library where everyone is welcome. She holds a BA from Michigan State University and a master's degree in library science from the University of Michigan. Ms. Luyt, in her capacity as a TCAP's Traverse City Area Public Schools library coordinator, works to provide inclusive and equitable library collections and programs that foster lifelong readers and learners. She believes in the power of books to change lives. She holds degrees from Wayne State University, Aquinas College, and the University of Michigan. Karrie Zeits has been a governmental law attorney since 2000, working for municipalities and other governmental entities in northern Michigan. As a governmental law attorney, she has regularly addressed First Amendment issues. Karrie has served as general counsel for the Traverse Area District Library from 2017 through now. As counsel for libraries, she has been involved in issues related to the freedom to read, a library's collection material selection policy, and challenges to library collections materials. Karrie will be presenting via Zoom. Jackie Richer has been living and interpreting in Traverse City area since the 1980s. Jackie holds certificates from the National Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf for interpreting and translating, and holds endorsements in medical, mental health, legal, and educational areas. The issue addressed today is not new, and we've had libraries, we've had education, especially since the beginning of our democracy, as it was built into the system a bit, with Thomas Jefferson donating his collection to the Library of Congress, which I found out is the largest library in the world, and that the libraries and education has been the basis for democracy in the viewpoint of our the formation in our leaders and also current day. The program today will focus on the process of publication, the process of library book stocking and selection, censorship, and book banning efforts, all with the goal of looking at how a library book gets into the hands of a reader. At the end of these presentations, there should be time for questions. We will have cards. The volunteers will bring them around, and some people may come in with the traffic tie-ups too yet. we'll have the program. We will be doing Zoom, and we will be doing real people, and we will be doing people who are putting something on the screen for us to see too. So we're first going to have Karrie Zeits. She will zoom in to explain her role and what will help us understand the legal involvement in public libraries and book selections. And this may take a minute. We were kind of figuring out a few details in the beginning. Looks like we're working on it. Up at the top.
Hello, can you guys, okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. It looks like my video is not coming on the screen, but that's okay. Thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm doing two different, oh, there we go. I'm joining you today from sunny Southern California, and the discussion is regarding the from publication to the public, a library book's path to the reader. And my piece will basically begin with the beginning and conclude with the end. And if you don't mind, it'll take me a moment and I will share my screen. So hopefully everyone can see my screen.
We cannot see your screen right now. Now we can see your screen.
Okay. So this should be the title page, From Publication to the Public, a library book's path to the reader. And as I indicated, I will begin with the beginning and start with the end, and our other presenters today will fill in everything in between. And where we begin this entire journey is with the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, or at least we begin the journey in the United States. And the First Amendment to the United States Constitution reads in relevant part, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Back in 1982, the United States Supreme Court in the Board of Education v. Pico announced the rule that the right to speak and publish includes the right to receive information. What this means is that generally the First Amendment protects everyone's right to speak and receive all information, regardless of the multitude of beliefs and values of individuals or institutions. All speech and the right to receive it is protected regardless of whether it is offensive to others. As Justice Brandeis said in Whitney versus California in 1927, the remedy for bad speech is more speech, not enforced silence. Libraries, both school and public libraries, have been the setting for battles over access to books and the removal of offensive books. However, as indicated, the First Amendment protects, generally speaking, all speech. However, there are certain limited categories of speech that are not protected under the United States Constitution. These include obscenity, child pornography, false advertising, true threats, and fighting words. Obscenity is the battleground for book challenges. Back in 1973, the United Supreme Court stated the rule in Miller versus California that the states have a legitimate interest and prohibiting dissemination or exhibition of obscene material when the mode of dissemination carries with it a significant danger of offending the sensibilities of unwilling recipients of or of exposure to juveniles. This pronunciation by the United States Supreme Court basically created what the United States Supreme Court has called over the years the obscenity problem. And what is the obscenity problem? The obscenity problem is that basically the pronunciation that obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment has created the battleground for book challenges and other challenges with respect to matters that would otherwise be protected by the First Amendment. What is obscenity? It is an extremely factual inquiry, and we will talk about that in the next slides. However, it should be noted that according to the ACLU, obscenity is a narrow, well-defined category of unprotected speech that excludes any work with serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Since then, few, if any, books have been deemed obscene. So that's principle number one. I think that's important for this discussion, is that few, if any, books have fallen under the definition of obscenity that's not protected by the First Amendment. So the flip side of that is few, if any, books should be banned because they are, quote unquote, obscene. So the Michigan non-standard jury instructions for criminal procedure provide us with a definition of obscenity. The definition of obscenity is the average individual applying contemporary community standards would find that the material taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. The material taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, and the material depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct. The criminal jury instructions take a deeper dive into what we mean by prurient interest, because that definition alone is not enough to guide juries in determining what is obscenity. The key to determining whether it is obscene and not protected by the First Amendment is whether it appeals to the prurient interest. The prurient interest means an unhealthy, unwholesome, morbid, degrading, or shameful interest in sex, a leering or longing interest. You need not find that the material would necessarily have a tendency to excite lustful thoughts in the average person. In fact, the material may appeal to a prurient interest in sex, even though it may disgust or sicken the average person. So that definition alone is, again, not enough to determine what is obscenity. We have to have a very convoluted definition of what it means to appeal to an average individual. And determining whether the material appeals to prurient interest in sex, you must determine whether the average individual in the community would find that the material has such appeal. Obscenity is not a matter of individual taste. Your personal opinion as a juror is not proper basis for determining whether the material is obscene or appeals to a prurient interest. You must judge how the average individual in the community would view the material. The average individual is the average of adults in the community. The material is not to be judged by the eye of any particularly sensitive or insensitive person, nor of the most prudish or most tolerant, but rather by the standard of the average person. Again, we need a further definition of what it is for contemporary community standards. Whether a contemporary community standards, this is important for determining whether it would appeal to the prurient interest of an average individual. and whether this material, the definition is whether this material taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest, and whether it portrays sexual conduct in a patently offensive way must be measured in terms of the contemporary community standards. You must determine whether this material violates those standards. Contemporary community standards mean the customary limits of candor and decency in the state at the time or near the time of possession of the materials. Contemporary community standards are determined by what is in fact accepted by the community as a whole. Community as a whole is society at large, and not particular people or particular groups. What some people think the community ought or ought not to accept is not important, nor is what you as an individual think is good or bad or important. It is what people in general, the community as a whole, accept that is determinative. And in order to determine whether something is obscene, we do not look at individual parts of the material. We look at the material as a whole in its entirety. Inclusion of innocuous text in the material will not serve to redeem the material if the dominant theme of the material is an appeal to the prurient interest. However, on the other hand, nor will inclusion of sexual material render the appeal prurient unless the dominant theme of the material is an appeal to the prurient interest. Finally, if you've gone through that entire test, you need to finally go to the final test, which is whether, in order to find a material obscene, is whether you have to find that it lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. In deciding whether the material has such value, you must consider whether a reasonable person would find serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value in the material taken as a whole. If the material has such a value, it is not obscene, even if it does, in some portions, appeal to the prurient interest. In doing so, you should consider the intent of the material and the circumstances of advertising, sale, or distribution of the material. So as you can see from the definition of obscenity as contained in our standard criminal jury instructions, the definition is quite complex, and there are multiple steps that have to be gone through in order to determine that a material is obscene. And as indicated by the ACLU, few, if any, books have met the obscenity standard based on that long and complicated test. And that is largely because books would, generally speaking, fall out of the category of obscenity on the serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, and the other portions of the test where it requires you to look at the material as a whole, not just isolated portions of a particular piece of material. And when persons challenge books, they generally speaking look at isolated portions of books and call that obscene. However, that is not the standard that needs to be used in order to determine whether something is obscene. It's look at the work in its totality in the whole context. The other category of speech that is not protected by the First Amendment is child pornography. And child pornography, based on the criminal definitions of child pornography, is really visual depictions of children, using actual children in visual depictions of pornographic activities. It would, generally speaking, not include books, because the reason why child pornography is allowed to be not protected by the First Amendment is of the overwhelming state interest in protecting children in in basically participating in the activities necessary in order to produce this type of material. It is to protect those persons that would have to participate in those activities in order to produce this type of this material, which are children. And the court has said that the state and the federal government have an overwhelming interest in protecting those persons. Thereby, child pornography does not receive the protection of the First Amendment. So how do we apply the First Amendment standards to the library's collection policy? Libraries can and do choose their collections through their collection policy. These policies should generally be content and viewpoint neutral to comply with the First Amendment. First Amendment requires government actors to be both content and viewpoint neutral in selecting or regulating what is otherwise protected by the First Amendment. In Kramer versus Bureau of Police for Town of Morristown, the court stated, our review of the Supreme Court's decisions confirms that the First Amendment does not merely prohibit the government from enacting laws that censor information, but additionally encompasses the positive right of public access to information and ideas. This right includes the right to some level of access to a public library, the quintessential locus of the receipt of information. Again, this does not mean that librarians lack discretion to select library materials in the first instance. It simply means that their selection criteria must serve the First Amendment's vital role in fostering individual self-expression and in affording the public access to discussion, debate, and the dissemination of information and ideas. When it comes to public spaces like public libraries, the governmental interest in protecting children from harmful materials does not justify an unnecessarily broad suppression of speech addressed to adults. The analysis is somewhat modified for school libraries. School libraries are permitted more control over age-appropriate selection criteria, while public libraries, according to the ALA's selection guidelines, should have the appropriateness of a selection of materials available to children, should leave that to the parents. The first place to look is your collection policy. TADL has a collection policy that specifically provides a methodology for persons to challenge materials. I have that copied onto the slide in front of you, which indicates that first, the TADL considers any challenges under a due process procedure, and the challenge needs to be presented on a form and in writing on a request for reconsideration of library collection materials, and that needs to be signed and dated by the individual challenging the item. And then the item will be reviewed by a committee composed of a director and a minimum of 2 members of the library leadership team. And they will decide whether to retain the item, remove it, or remove it from the collection. The challengers will then be notified in writing, and they will be allowed an opportunity to appeal in front of the Board of Trustees for the district library if they don't agree with the decision. And when reviewing that book or the challenged item, again, in connection with typically a lot of challenges come in the form that the material is obscene, you have to go back to that principle that you have to review the item as a whole and not just the specific provisions being pointed out as obscene, but as a whole to determine if it meets that definition of obscene. In summary, the First Amendment protects the right of free speech, which includes the right to read. Libraries are free to choose and cultivate their collections but such choices must be in compliance with the First Amendment. This means that the public library should provide access to materials in accordance with clear, content-neutral collection guidelines. All ideas are protected with narrow exceptions. One of these exceptions provides fertile ground for controversy over books. In evaluating any claim that a book is obscene or pornographic, the standards for such determination that have been developed by the courts should be your guide.
Thank you, Karrie Zeits. And now Stephie Luyt is going to be bringing her information to you. She is supervisor for libraries with Traverse City Area Public Schools.
Thank you. It's nice to be here today. Is that better? Is that better? Okay. Okay. I'm not going to turn my head. Okay. We're looking at the school side a little bit more specifically. So we have the same considerations in the school libraries as we do in the public libraries with some differences. But the school libraries play a unique role in intellectual freedom. It's a point of voluntary access to information for students, and it serves as a learning lab for critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Collection development, we've talked about this a little bit, but it's the term that encompasses the selection policy or the selection process and how we make decisions on what is added to our collections, as well as the ongoing part of the process, which is evaluating our collections and then removing materials that no longer meet the selection criteria or materials that are no longer in circulation because of their physical condition. And this does include anything that's a donation to the library. School libraries are guided by the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights and the interpretive statements access to resources and services in the school library program that stem from established law. I thought these two points were important to note. Members of the school community involved in the collection development process employ educational criteria to select resources unfettered by their personal, political, social, or religious views. School librarians resist efforts by individuals or groups to define what is appropriate for all students or teachers to read, view, hear, or access, regardless of technology, formats, or method of delivery. I won't spend too much time on this because Karrie covered some of the legal cases that guide this work, but here are a couple that are specific to schools. So the selection development policy, the selection policy that we have in TCAPS follows a lot of the same criteria as the public library that Karrie touched on, but some of the purposes for our collection or our selection policy is to implement the mission of the district through library collection development and access, ensure that selection relates to curriculum needs, best practice instruction, and development of lifelong readers and learners, ensure equity and quality in the selection of resources, ensure the best possible expenditure of funds, and identify responsibility for the selection of systems and materials. And how the selection relates to our mission, we identify how this process fulfills our district's mission, and we identify how it meets student needs. So this is just a slide to show our strategic plan, and I've identified the objectives specifically in our overall strategic plan and how libraries relate most specifically to those objectives. But if you, it's a little bit small, but Objective 4 says develop a system to ensure curriculum and media materials include inclusive and diverse topics to meet the needs of all learners. So it's, and there are other objectives that go right in line, but it's part of the overall mission of our district. And so the selection policy is outlined in board policy, so created by our Board of Education. And part of the selection policy identifies who makes those selections. Certified school librarians are people who hold a current teaching certificate with the library media endorsement, which oddly is ND. I don't know why. To have the ND endorsement, you have a master's degree in library science or certification with the ND on your teaching certificate. There are different titles for certified school librarians, and they're different within TCAPS. Some are teacher librarians, some are library coordinators, but in accordance with the MDE, who requires that an educator with the ND endorsement provide administration of a school library, and a key component of that administration is the collection development. So this is a little bit more granular, just to show you what we have in TCAPS. We have 4 certified school librarians. So we have a .7 elementary library coordinator for our 11 elementary schools. We have a .7 middle school library coordinator for our 2 middle schools, and each of our traditional high schools have a 1.0 FTE in each building. We identify the needs in our collections and our overall goals. We're looking for materials to extend and support the curriculum, topics or subjects that are missing from the collection, representation of varied points of view and perspective, student reading interests, and staff and student requests. I won't read all these, but these are just directly from our board policy, some of the selection criteria that we're looking at. You'll notice representation of varied points of view and perspective, student interest, extending existing resources, and under format, that's different formats of what the materials will be. So we're making sure that we are covering all the ways that people like to access information. I'm not saying we're covering all the ways, but we try. And then the resources we use to make those selections. And although we try, we can't read all the books that fill the gaps in our collections. Librarians must rely on resources to assist with the selection process. Vetted summaries and reviews from professional journals and book award lists are important tools. Some of those that are most helpful in the schools are School Library Journal, Book List, Kirkus Review, Horn Book, and then the many, many, many media awards that are given to books that have been vetted through committees and have been given as examples of exemplary work. Those are always a place that we're looking. And then all of the many ways that we're all made aware of books through, publisher resources, social media, and feedback from students, staff, and community as well. Schools are a little bit different from the viewpoint that we have collections of books in different parts of the school that are guided a little bit different, are guided by policy in different ways. So classroom libraries and anything that is instructional material that would be required content or required reading or specific to a grade in the curriculum has different considerations for selection, and that information or those materials would be vetted through the curriculum side of the school, and we have more leeway in a whole school library because we represent multiple grades in terms of student use, but there's so much choice in a school library, and we, more like a public library, a school that serves a collection that serves a full school doesn't have we are able to have more choice. And so if it's something that isn't going to be required for all students, there is a little bit of a different vetting process through board policy. This is just a slide to show, you've probably seen this quote many times, but explaining the value of having an inclusive collection and why it's important for students. But we need our collections to mirror not only our existing community, what the lived experiences that the kids and the students who are the kids and the teachers who are accessing the material have, but the wider community as a whole and the global community. So having our kids read about and learn about experiences different than their own is incredibly valuable. There are a couple resources we use for building inclusive collections. In the state, we have the Myself in Books list, which is created by certified school librarians and looks at books that are recently published, so in the last 2 years, and that's a resource that's very helpful. The We Need by Diverse Books movement, and then our the learning management system, or our software system that we use has quite a bit that we can sort when we're looking to have representation of all different types of lived experiences. These are some of the focus areas under AASL, which is the professional organization that guides school librarians. And like all other content areas, we have school and education standards that guide our work. We have the same issues if we have issues in terms of we have the same set of steps that we use when we have a challenge. And challenges, I would say in the olden days, followed more of an individual, we've had questions from parents and community members about books for years, but it has changed in the last few years, and we have had questions come up when it is something that's happening more as a campaign. There's been lots and lots of lists circulating that have been challenged as a whole. This is different and harder to deal with because it doesn't. It's not as authentic, in my opinion, because we work with parents and families all the time to help make sure that their student is accessing information that works with their family's values and focus areas. But the blanket challenges that have come in that have looked to limit access for everybody's children, not just their own child, that's concerning. But we respond to challenges in the same way that the public library does. But I do very much appreciate when I have family members or families of students who are interested and know what their students are reading. And so I do appreciate when they want to talk about that. It's great that they're involved and they know what their student is reading. Letting the person know that they have the right to question the material, listening fully to the challenge, staying student focused, and sharing our process for reconsideration. Our first step in the process is to have a discussion between the certified librarian and the parent. It's usually a parent. And we have students who have their parents prefer that they don't read about certain topics, and we can put a note that would say that this student in particular can't read about this certain topic, but it's individual and it's just between the student and the librarian. The access to that material stays open to all other patrons in the library. When we have a challenge that cannot be solved at that individual level, the next step is to have a discussion with, sometimes it actually goes lots of different ways, but it can go next to a principal or have a discussion with the teacher about other options in terms of if there are, ways to use the student's interest and maybe guide them to something different that would work. If we do need to have a formal challenge, which we have had a few of those recently, but then we have a form that the person needs to fill out. It does include the request that they note that they have read the entirety of the work, which is always a question. And I've linked the form here, but we can go into more detail about that if there are questions. And that's the end of my slide.
Michele Howard is now trying to escape. She's coming back. And she has a lot of experience in libraries as well as community organizations. And she will be addressing the public library as the director. And it's fine, plenty of time. You want to stand here or sit? Fine.
Okay, thanks everyone for coming tonight. I'm just going to give a little bit more information. I've been like scribbling as Karrie has said something, so I've sketched it out, and Stephie has something, so hopefully I can round it out with some other information. Just how we deal with just how we buy books to how we even get rid of books at the public library. So first off, I thought this was interesting. I looked this up today. Every year between 500,000 and 1 million books are published. And as much as the librarians wished we could just sit around and read them all, we cannot. That is not our job, but we are in charge of buying them. And if you add self-published books, that's about 4 million books a year. So it's a big job. So what we do is we use publishers, book vendors, same as at school libraries. We use magazines, professional magazines, to read the reviews of books because we just don't have time to read them all. And these vendors that we buy books from do not sell pornography. They don't sell obscenities, and so these are the places we buy books. So sometimes when people say, oh, the library bought pornography, they really are, like Karrie explained the definition, like we really aren't buying pornography. We cannot buy it, and we do not buy it. And just a word about self-published books. We rarely purchase these. We do get them donated to us because they haven't gone through the published vetting process. Publishers read books. They have the editors. And a self-published book could be anything. So we really are cautious about adding them to the collection. If they are added, it's usually because someone donated it. So how do we pick them with 500,000 to 1 million books is, again, using those publications. And like Karrie said, using our collection development policy. And it's on our website so that anybody can read it. But this is something the board approved. And I just wanted to read this one statement under the goal of it. It says the Traverse Area District Library strives to connect people to the transforming power of knowledge. The library strives to provide current, credible, and authoritative informational, educational, cultural, and recreational materials in all media, both published and unpublished, within the constraints of budget and space, while recognizing the personal, educational, and cultural diversity of the residents of the community it serves. I think that's one sentence. Maybe it's two. It's really long. But it is our goal is to connect people to information, and that means all people. And we really hope that when some person walks into our library that they have a book that they see themselves in. And we know life is messy and uncomfortable and bad things happen. And so we collect even those hard stories that are hard for people to read because it's so important. It's part of our strategic plan. It's what we believe as librarians is that people should be able to see and read stories similar to themselves. So I highlighted a few other things about our selection of materials. And it's the biggest thing is our materials that we select should not be construed as endorsement. People love serial killer books. We do not endorse serial killing at all. So, it's just like, that's kind of a funny situation. But if you take it to the other way, someone might say, why do you have books about Muslim faith? Why do you have books about witchcraft? Which I will tell you, the witchcraft books often get stolen. And I was going to mention in censorship, I don't know if it's the people who practice witchcraft stealing them or if it's people censoring our collection by stealing the books on witchcraft. So again, we have a lot of materials and we don't endorse any of it. So you'll see in our policy, we have some general guidelines, and then we even have specific guidelines for specific types of information. So medical information has a specific guideline that it has to be authoritative, factual, current, and understandable on common health and hygiene matters for the layperson. This is where we've gotten requests by people to buy published books by people who aren't physicians or who have physicians who've lost their license. And so we use this policy to say, no, we're not going to buy that. It doesn't happen very often. And so our policy also recognizes that there are some materials that are controversial in nature and may offend some patrons. It says it right there. However, disapproval of an item by individual or group should not be the criteria which dictates denial of the item from all, right? So one group can't pick. And then there's some more stuff in there that we really use to guide our selection process. So we also use patron input at the library. We get suggestions all the time. If there's a book you really want and we don't have it, suggest it. We typically will buy it, or we'll try to get it through the interlibrary loan MEL, is like statewide loaning system. So we get a lot of patron input. And here's another thing. If you suggest a book, we typically put you first on the hold list. So that's kind of a nice little perk. It's like you get it first if you suggest we buy it. And then we weed books. We weed books all the time. We need to do some weeding right now. And so sometimes if people worry about like a donated book, like a donated self-published book that was donated, typically if a book doesn't circulate even one time in 3 years, we'll weed it. So we have a process so that if things aren't popular, they kind of just, get taken off the shelf. And so that's the selection of our books. And then in terms of censorship of our books, the librarians try not to censor. I mean, I guess when you look at what we buy, those decisions we make every day could be considered some form of censorship because we can't buy them all. We just don't have a budget. So we try to do what is most reflected in our community. But sometimes people have asked us to label our books. And I don't know if the school gets this. Could you just put a label on every LGBTQ book? That is in our policy. We do not do that. There have been libraries who've done that. We don't do that. And if Karrie's listening, she knows. She knows that's part of our policy. We won't label in any sort of way. But that's typically the request that a lot of public libraries are seeing is, in the children's collection, please put a sticker on all the queer books. Also, for us, we don't censor what kids read. That is really up to the parents. The legal theory is called we never act in loco parentis. And it said so is in our collection policy. It is the responsibility of the parents to decide what is appropriate for their children. And like Stephie said, not someone else's child. That's not their decision. And so what we offer to people if they come in upset about a book that's in the collection is we will teach you how to make sure that your child doesn't read a book like that. We have a wonderful resource called Novelist. And so you can look up the title of the book and it will tell you, what difficult issues are covered in that book so that you can have your child avoid that topic. So if someone is upset, we try to steer them to ways to educate themselves on how to make sure they get what they want because other parents want those books. So it's always a balancing act. But we also have some things called shadow censorship a little bit here. I talked about the witchcraft books. Those tend to disappear quickly. For a little while, we're having someone hide any of our LGBTQ nonfiction books. They were not checking them out because they know if they check them out, we buy more. So what they do is they take them and they hide them all around the library. But our pages are trained. They find them. I presented to a group at Cordia. They said they would bring their Cordia bus and search our collection if we needed it. So angry about book banning. And those are the little things that people do. We had sometimes someone took a book and scribbled like in marker, wrote some not very nice words about the author in the book. So what did we have to do? We had to buy a new book. I think they were trying to make a statement about the author, and instead we just ended up giving the author more money. So little things like that happen here that we try to catch as they happen. And then finally, book banning at TADL, we haven't had a lot. Luckily, just this week, the American Library Association released their numbers for 2023, And there has been a 95% increase in book banning attempts in public libraries. And these are some of my colleagues throughout the state. One librarian was threatened with prosecution of a felony and jail time because they had a book called Gender Queer on their shelves. There's been librarians harassed for books they don't even have in their collection. And like Stephie said, there are groups out there that, if you look at the form I gave you, the request for consideration, they will actually, basically, almost all libraries have the same form. And so they basically have all this information on their website so that you can say, oh, I read it, this is the page, this is what's offensive. And so libraries are getting inundated with hundreds of these. And sometimes what they do is they don't fill out the form, so librarians are like, I have to fill out the form. You want to send me 100, or even like they're using like the most banned books list that the ALA publishes. They're actually using that list to submit back at us what they want banned. I was like, that's not the point. And so, you know, we have a committee. We make sure that people know we've added a few things over the years because we're seeing all of our colleagues and what they're going through. We ask if they live in the area, because there's groups of people from Texas filing these things all over the country, right? And it's so, would it matter? No. Like, that's the thing. Everyone can walk into our doors, so because of that, we can't limit who can put in a challenge because we're open to anybody. But we just put that on there to find out, like, oh, where are you calling? Where are you coming from? So since I've been the director since 2019, I've only had one official request to remove a material, and that was about a year ago. It was for a movie that someone found was offensive because it had a mass shooting event in the movie. And so I had my committee, we reviewed it, we reviewed the reviews. It had won tons of awards. It was an acclaimed movie internationally, and so I wrote the patron back, and they were satisfied with that. But it was a local patron. We knew who it was. I've had one official request to move a book. It was about a girl going through puberty, and during it, she realizes that she likes a friend who's female. Nothing happens. It's just a reference to her maybe being attracted to that female. It's in our youth department because it's about puberty. They asked us to move it to the adult collection. We denied that request. It's a book about puberty. It's not a book about adults. And so again, informing that patron how to educate themselves to, if you don't want your child to read that, we're going to show you how to find reviews that tell you that. Let's see, what else do I have? We did have one event last year. It never got to an official request for consideration, but there was a group of people that signed a letter. It was called Hide the Pride. And we had pride displays in our library, in the teen department and the youth department. They came in and checked out as many books as they could. And then they sent us a letter saying, if you don't remove these books, we're never going to return them. And I was like, well, that's an interesting challenge. Like, if you return them, so basically we'll return them, but you have to throw them away. And we want you to throw away any other LGBTQ book that's in your teen or youth department. They ended up returning the books. They just returned them, which is nice. They had checked out so many books that they couldn't even check out their own books, you know. So it was kind of a thing. But it was them, you know, exercising their faith, and that's the reason they said it. And so they returned the books, and it kind of was not a big deal. We were happy to get them back, and we have systems in the library where if someone returns, checks out a bunch of books and don't return them, well, we bill them for the books. So I think it was just their statement of faith. Then they returned them, and it ended up being fine. Let's see. I think that's kind of all the information I had about the library and what's been happening here. But maybe we should do question and answers. Okay.
Okay, there are cards if you want to write them down, or we don't have a mic to move around to people. So if that's possible, that would be good. We're passing out cards if anyone has questions, and we do have some other questions lined up. What I have here is, what is the ALA, the American Library Association, and what role do they play? Who are they? What role do they play in having books in your libraries?
So the American Library Association is the national organization that library members belong to. They are a nonprofit. They do some lobbying with the government, and they produce standards that you'll see that are replicated in our libraries policy: the freedom to read, the freedom to view, the right to read. What's the other one? No, maybe there's 3 or 4. They have come under some controversy recently. It was a statement made by the president of the ALA, who made a statement about, she stated that she was a Marxist lesbian, and using those words caused a lot of people to get upset about that. And so some states are actually demanding that their state libraries leave the American Library Association. I've got one call about that, just saying, why are we a part of it? And truly, they are a granting agency too. We get grants from the American Library Association. We get free information. We get free trainings from them. And I think it was just an unfortunate statement, but it's caused kind of an uproar with the ALA. I don't know, do you want to add anything else?
Well, I was just going to say that the ALA has divisions, and so the American Association of School Librarians is a division of ALA. There's the Association of Library Services to Children, ALSC, is a division of ALA, and there's a whole bunch of other divisions. And they have state chapters. So there's a Michigan Library Association, there's a Michigan Association of School Librarians. But just like any professional association, kind of provides guidance and support, and, they're fielding all the legal, they're getting a lot of that information and helping the affiliate organizations respond. And they're just a resource for help from all the chapters for the most part.
Yeah.
What is censorship? How would you define censorship? We have book banning. What is censorship?
So censorship is the reduction of access or the loss of access to material in whatever form that takes. So it can be the hiding of the books around the library. It can be, the removal of a book by the powers that be. It can be somebody in a school taking a book out of a library. It can be, it's removing access to the material for the intended patrons.
That was way better than I would have done.
How would you compare Michigan to other states, such as Texas, Florida, regarding legislation pertaining to library materials? If you know. I mean,
I can only speak from the school library side. We are in a much better position than my friends and colleagues in states like Missouri and Florida and Texas. But we are always just one election away from being those places. We've had legislation introduced that would criminalize the work we do. It didn't go anywhere, but I feel like it's, but to answer the question, there's a Michigan in terms of school libraries has gotten much less in terms of the formal censorship, but we have a lot of shadow or soft censorship happening that doesn't go to the it doesn't end up at a board meeting. It's not Dearborn. It's not, some of the big things you've seen at school board meetings, but it's the soft and now more quiet censorship happening around the state.
Yeah, and in terms of public libraries, we're not like Illinois passed a law banning book banning. It's and that passed through their state legislature. And we don't have that in Michigan, but we also aren't being criminalized like Florida and Texas, and people aren't just marching into libraries and taking books off the shelf. There is legislation that will hopefully be introduced in Michigan by a couple legislators that would basically not allow, like, ban book bannings in the state. And, we're hopeful that that would go a long way to at least alleviate the fears of some librarians that we would be prosecuted.
Michele, is that the right to read legislation?
Yeah, that's the right to read. It has not been introduced yet.
And do you know anything about it, as in how far along it is in the process, or even what is really in it?
Mm-hmm. So we're hoping it gets introduced. I am on the Michigan Library Association board. We're hoping it gets introduced in April. Because there's 2 legislative seats open right now. They're waiting until those get filled. So hopefully those will be filled soon. And what's in it is basically it removes the ability of boards to remove books, because what some libraries have seen is a takeover of their boards by people who just want to remove books. They tend to fire the library director, and then they actually walk in and remove books from the shelves of the libraries. So it would prevent that. So it would leave a lot of the authority with libraries, and it would also just codify a lot of those things we talk about for freedom to read. And like the court cases are saying, and just putting that into our state laws, so it's just clear, and we'll know more once it's officially introduced, but that's the theme.
Okay, so it hasn't been introduced yet.
Not
then.
yet.
Still, okay, great.
I do, and their names just went out of my head. I can email more about it later, yeah. Yeah, it's Pius. Yeah, Glenn. Yeah, she's got it. Pius, Representatives Pius and
Glanville, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's Representative Paez, P-A-I-Z. And is it Glanville?
I think it's Glenville. I'll see if I can find it really quick while the
Now
next
that
question.
I'm saying this to the mic, it's
I know, and it's recorded
Now I'm
and
really doubting
all over the
myself.
internet. Yeah.
How about charter schools? Do they work with, the official library organizations, or do they simply have their own process? Do you have any idea?
So library staffing in Michigan is an interesting point, because we are 46th in the country for the ratio of students to certified school librarians. And so, and you can see a stark decline that also lines up with our reading scores, where we're also 46th in the country on NWEA and those reading scores. So a lot of schools do not have a certified school librarian, and so they wouldn't have somebody who has the experience or education background around all the guiding principles and the laws. That isn't, so a charter school may have somebody doing that, but they may not. And so a charter school, the policy, the selection policy in a public school, a charter school, in a religiously affiliated school, they may or may not have. I'm not sure what their selection policies would look like, if that makes sense.
We hear a lot about inclusive for LGBT, non-white persons, etc. We have Traverse City, but do you know the rural communities, which we do have up here in northern Michigan, do you have any insight into what they are establishing in their libraries regarding materials?
Sure. So, like the book Gender Queer that everyone got really upset about, a year or more ago, we actually talked at a regional meeting of like libraries in the kind of in the tip of Michigan, and only 3 of us actually had the book. And so it's like those rural libraries do reflect their communities. And the thing is, we are all also a part of a statewide sharing system. And so sometimes, like Petoskey had some challenges about that book. And the idea is basically like, even if Petoskey were to remove it, a person could request it through interlibrary loan. Because there's libraries all over the state that have it. So I think that we have like regional sharing, which I think broadens every collection in the state. Even if that specific library doesn't have it, someone can get it from somewhere else.
Okay, I think you'll like this one. What can community members do to support libraries?
Well, there are, like the right to read bills, 3 bills were introduced that would require a school library in every school and a school librarian in every school. And those were introduced by Senator Darren Camilleri, who's in Trenton. And the timeline for when those will go into I think they go to the committee. I believe that the first step is they have been introduced, but there's language for funding that's going to go into the budget proposal before they go into the committee, or go to a committee hearing. There may be partner bills coming through the House soon. There is also the discussion of a bill that would require information literacy to be taught in K-12 schools, and those are really, really important bills to be aware of, in addition to the right to read bill. But asking questions of the staffing that you have in your communities, schools, libraries is helpful to see. And speaking up that it matters, and having the library matters, and supporting all the ecosystem of libraries, schools, public, academic, it's all part of the bigger picture of information access.
Yeah, and I agree. I think just reading and talking to people about reading, being seen reading, and coming to the library and supporting that. This summer I was on Isle Royal, which is really remote, and someone was telling me, oh, libraries don't matter, and they make kids read gay books. And I was like, have you ever tried to make a kid read a book? It doesn't work. My youngest is not a reader, much to my heartbreak, but I think just talking about it, I didn't back down from this person, and I just talked to them, and I'm like, well, when was the last time you were at a library? And you might be surprised. There's 3D printers, there's Wi-Fi, and they travel for work. And I said, and there's really clean bathrooms. So I think not being afraid to talk about reading books that are controversial, I think is part of it. And, I think just sharing that knowledge and sharing the use of, you come to the library and support it, I think that's important.
And I think it's really interesting, the statistics that I heard at a conference. It's like 35 people that have put in the vast majority of challenges to schools and public libraries. I mean, it's like this handful of people that are responsible for everything that happened in Florida, not to mention groups like Moms for Liberty or so it's a very organized, very intentional, very well-funded campaign that does not reflect, according to polls, what the general public feels. And so I think for people who disagree with the approaches or the, the calls to censor is to speak up and say, this is not okay, and this is not what we believe is a good approach to our libraries.
What about issues of privacy in coming to the library, checking out a book, and whether other people know you have checked out that book?
So for here, we take privacy very seriously. There's a Michigan law, there's a Michigan Library Privacy Act. You'll notice if you do holds, the titles are flipped. And we will never tell anyone what you check out. Someone would actually need a court order from a judge to see your library record. We purposely set the system to delete all your past checkouts unless you select otherwise. Even though that is hard for people when they're like, I read a book a year ago. We're like, unless you said in the app you want to keep it, we delete it. Even your presence here is protected. If someone called and said, I'm looking for my friend Anne, she's wearing this, is she there? We won't even tell people if you're here. So whatever you check out, whatever you look on our computers, and even just your presence here is protected by that law, and we take it very, very seriously.
Where does the money for the library come from, and who hires the head librarian? Is there money from the state as well as local?
Yeah, and schools, I don't know about, you get 100% from the state, right?
Correct.
So for public libraries, we're 90% millage funded, and that's voted by the taxpayers at increments typically of every 10 years. It's up to the library board to present that to the voters, and the library board picks the library director. So the other 10% that we get is from state aid for libraries, grants, penal fines is something that's in the state constitution. So we, I had a funny phrase like speeding for reading. So if you have to pay tickets, if you go to court, those fines actually come to libraries. And that's constitutionally allotted, even though there's legislators who are trying to get that money. And it keeps getting reduced every year. So that's the other 10%, but mostly it's millage funded.
Okay, and I don't know if this would apply, whoops, to our schools. I'm losing my cards. But Stephie, you said,
Would Karrie just chime in, I guess?
oh,
I don't know. Okay. I don't know if she has anything. Okay, I think we're good. All right.
You mentioned where we are in the ranking of states. Is that regarding the number of librarians per pupils?
So based on the number of librarians we have in the state, then we look at the total number of students in the state. So we rank 46 with numbers of certified librarians we have. So they're servicing like way, way, way more, if you took all of the people in the state divided out. So that ranks us 46. And yes, and then our fourth grade reading scores are also there.
And here in Traverse City, we have consolidated some elementary schools over the years. How many elementary schools are there? How many libraries? How many librarians?
So TCAPS has currently 11 elementary schools that are staffed at various levels by paraprofessionals, and we have my position for those 11 schools. And then we have the 2 middle schools have a part-time person shared. There's paraprofessionals in those buildings as well. And then the high schools have their staffing. So we are very appreciative to have the positions we have, but we would like more positions.
A good place to put community support. Right?
Yes, please.
And actually this, I don't know if this is. Do you know if there are, and if so, how many bookmobiles type? Do we have anything like that?
In Traverse City, we have ours. It was, I think somebody took it. They took it somewhere, but we have one. I know there's one in Boyne, but ours just services our service area, Grand Traverse County. And I should say for funding that, and like our sign is 100% funded by donations and grants. So we do get people who donate to special projects like that too. But ours is getting very popular. We had one until the 70s, and then it kind of went out of commission and they didn't replace it. And now we have another one again. It's really great. People love to see it, and we try to get to people who can't get to us. So we have 9 different outreaches to senior facilities, daycares, schools, special events, stuff like that.
Good. What is the demographics of the borrowers now versus historical time? And then, of course, libraries do more now regarding virtual resources and technology and so on.
Well, it's funny. I don't know the statistics. I should look them up for our library. But overall, to professors at a university just released a study, and I was at a conference and saw them present. And they were saying some of our largest library users are Generation Z and millennials. They love libraries. And at night, you'll see here, if you come in at night, you'll see those generations of people here. Millennials are bringing their kids back, and Zs are just coming too. They love the print, and it was something crazy, like 35% of them do not consider themselves readers, yet they love what the library offers in terms of programming, music, movies, digital resources. So we're seeing this surge of our younger generations using the public library.
At TCAPS, how many reconsideration requests have been received at each school level? Do you have any idea?
Formal reconsideration.
I'm assuming, yes.
There were 2 last school year at the high school level. I believe that's all the formal reconsiderations last year. We've had them in the past, but to have 2 in one year was rare. 2 formal that went all the way, like forming the committee, doing the whole process. Oh, which books? So genderqueer was one, and Onyx and Crake, which is it's a book that's included in the AP curriculum, one of the choice books in the AP curriculum, and both of those were retained in the collection. They both stayed in the collection.
Overall, what generally do you think are the top 2 reasons for people to object to a book? Either actually banning or the complaint that comes up to you.
The top one for me is LGBTQ issues, any queer books. We have a nonfiction adult book that is about lesbian relationships. It did include information about sexual interactions between 2 women. That a woman was very, very angry that we had that. But that's the theme, and I think when we look at all the statistics, that tends to be it. I haven't had it here, but statistically, what the American Library Association is saying, it tends to be books on queer issues or books on about African American people. Slavery. Jason Reynolds has hid books. Race theory. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I would echo that.
Karrie, are you there yet?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Perhaps not. Karrie?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, okay. You mentioned, the First Amendment. Does when people are bringing their challenges for book banning and it gets into the legal area, are they protected or is one of the arguments, because I really don't know, is one of the arguments that they have the right?
To challenge a book?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. They have just as right to challenge a book as the individual has the right to create the book.
Okay. There was so much to the legal aspect of what you went through that a lot of it blended together, I know, for me. And it's very specific for how the process works and what has to be moved through to get to that. Okay.
And even their privacy is protected. We redact if, any information. Karrie has always advised me if someone asks, like, FOIA or challenges, like, you even have privacy over if you want to challenge a book. We protect that, too.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Okay. I think this has been splendid. I think it's been very interesting. And it simply shows, it shows the kind of work librarians do. And we really appreciate you giving your time and coming here and speaking to us. And do you think we should? Yeah. So many thanks to Michele Howard, Stephie Luyt, and Karrie Zeits for zooming in and presenting and giving us all of this information. Also to Jackie Richer, interpreter, and big thanks to Josh Danby from Traverse Area District Library and Joe Torrance from Traverse Area Community Media. They truly work magic in getting all of this together. And to our audience, both present and tuned in today or maybe later on. Next month, our program is on media literacy, how to tell whether the information you are getting has integrity and truth, especially with AI and social media discrepancies. April 16th at 5 o'clock. Our presenters will be Rebecca Pierce, Executive Editor of the Record Eagle, and Scott Harmson, Adjunct Professor at Grand Valley State University. They will be joined by Tac Reddy, West Senior High Government and History teacher, who will discuss how they teach media literacy in high school and civics classes, and Ed Ronco, News Director at Interlochen Public Radio, to discuss how they decide what to cover, their code of ethics, and everything in between. These flyers with helpful information on that topic are available for you when you leave. Please complete the evaluation forms that should be floating around somewhere, either on your seat or distributed by a League member. To find out more about the League or to join, please visit our website at lwvgta.org. Tell your friends that this program is available for viewing on the League of Women Voters of the Grand Traverse Area Facebook page, Traverse Area Community Media website to live stream, and Community TV Channel 189 with Spectrum Cable TV in Northwest Lower Michigan. Thank you very much for coming.
I know, I shouldn't have had, I was a readback. We kind of worked out that for her to go first.